Alright everybody, diecastmania here, and welcome back to another review. Today we have a special, pretty hard to find model. You really can't find very much about this. This is the Euclid R-50 off-highway dump truck made by P.D. Jones in 4mm scale, which is the British model railway scale, 1/76 scale. It's called 4mm because it's 4mm per every foot. That's the ratio. Roughly translated over. So, like I said, this model was made by P.D. Jones, you can see, and distributed by ABS Models back in the late 1970s, early 80s. So ABS was a pretty well-known British manufacturer and distributor of white metal-based model railroad products and kits. So this model, from what I can tell, production started in 1977, around the time that the real machine was being built. And I'm not really sure when or how long they made this model for. And from what I understand, it was also available as a kit. So, for those who don't know, white metal is an alloy, usually of, relatively low melting point workable metals like lead, pewter, that kind of thing. So, bearing in mind those are relatively soft metals, so the models are a little more fragile. They tend to deform a little bit if you stored improperly, but it can't be fixed with a little bit of gentle pressure. But you definitely want to make sure that you don't force anything past the strength of the material. Like I said, this model was made in 1977, so it is fairly old at this point. It's pretty basic. Wheels roll, dump bed raises, though there are no actual hydraulic cylinders modeled that work. This model is, like I said, very simple, but it is pretty nicely mastered, meaning that every single piece of this, before they could make the molds and cast this, they had to be made by hand, probably out of brass, plastic, maybe even wood, and then all those parts would be taken back apart and molded individually to create the molds for the kit or the model you see in front of you. Pretty simple, though it's got some pretty nice areas of detail on it for what it is. You can see, the hubs on the wheels, the decals are done really nicely, the paint's not overly thick. And then looking underneath the model, see where the bottom of the engine is, the transmission, the rear axle, bits of the suspension. And then on the front, we can see what would be the radiator and the lights behind the grille. There is no window glazing on this model, as you would kind of expect. And inside the cab, there actually is a figure behind the steering wheel. Though it's only painted in green. They didn't take the time to paint the figure realistically, though. Not really something that I would have expected. Bearing in mind that this was a model that was created pretty much without the technological advances and resources that a larger die-cast manufacturer like Conrad or NZG would have had at the time. So, all things considered, it is a pretty nice piece. So, the late 70s, early 80s is a real transformative time for Euclid. So as of, I think, 1977, they would have been owned by White Motor Company. And a little bit after that, Michigan, or Daimler-Benz took over, and then Clark, Michigan took over. And that led right into the VME joint venture, which was Volvo, Michigan, Euclid. And then in the 90s, Hitachi took over when VME kind of fell apart. So, like I said, this model is really simple, but it does look pretty nice. The paint is really done pretty well on this. And then one more thing to point out, the mud flaps here are actually hinged, which is kind of cool for what it is. And then the tread pattern on the tires is pretty nice. I'm not sure if the tires are actually like a hard plastic or if they're metal cast and painted to look like rubber. So for those of you who are wondering what engine would this model have had, so you had a choice of three. You had the Detroit 16V71, 608 horsepower, the Cummins VT 1710C at 635 horsepower, and the Mercedes OM 425LA at 600 horsepower. So you had your options there. This around that time, I think a 50-ton haul truck would have been a respectable size. Yet this is for anyone that seems to try to suggest that this model may be 1/50th scale. It is not even close. So on the left we have the Euclid R-35 by Conrad in 1/50th scale, and on the right we have the P.D. Jones R-50. So we can see there is a very obvious scale difference. So yeah, if you ever see this model advertised as 1/50th scale, like I said, to the best of my knowledge, no such model was made, and here's the size difference to demonstrate that. And here it is next to the OHS brass 1/87th scale Terex 33100B, which is the same as the TR100, 33100, and you know, roughly the same size as the 3311. So this would have been a 100-ton, 8,500 ton haul truck, depending on what year and what designation. You know, the 3311s kind of tended towards the 85-ton range, and then later with 33100, TR100, the capacity increased to the 100-ton range. So here it is, also next to the Boley / Smart Toys 3307 Terex, which is a bootleg of the Keebri kit. So, you know, if you put it next to the 3307, it almost feels within the realm of being passable for HO scale. But then when you put it next to a true 1/87 scale precision model like the 33100B, then you can kind of realize, okay, it's larger than it should be, as it makes sense as it's 1/76 scale versus 1/87 scale. So that's, you know, our little smaller scale green lineup. I finally have a haul truck to go with a model I really didn't know what to do with, the Shinsei Caterpillar 992C wheel loader. 992 is a little large to pass match the R-50, but you know, it doesn't look too bad. The 992 supposedly 1/75th scale, and the Euclid is 1/76th. So, and then just for giggles, this is a 1/76 scale Ford Ranger from Oxford Diecast, and that's what you know, around the modern size pickup looks like next to the R-50. So I'd say that's pretty accurate. So anyway, there you go. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. We'll see you all in the next one.